Yeah, seems like we're live now, right?
Not yet. Are we live?
Yeah, we are. It
I
says
think
here.
so. Let me just check the Facebook. If you guys want to share on your own Facebook page, can do watch party also. No problem.
How do you do that?
We are live.
You can just copy the link lah.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah.
No, I think if I do that now, my fingers will be dancing all over the keyboard in front of the webcam. So I'm just going to avoid.
Okay.
Thanks, Alvin, for going live before I was ready.
Sorry.
So there is now video footage of me fixing my hair. Okay. So we're live now. Thank you everyone for joining us. This is our second Facebook live chat, and we hope you enjoyed the first one. Today we've got two very special guests with us. They are Kien Lee from Senators.net and Jamie Tan from Augustman. And so it's really great having them with us today, and we'll be talking about some issues affecting the watch industry, the media, the lifestyle media in particular. And we'll just give them some time to talk about their own platforms first. So Kien, why don't you start?
Hi, everybody. My name is Kien. I run a digital website called Senators.net, Senatus.net. Been in the business for slightly over a decade now, so compared to the others, maybe still quite a little newbie in terms of covering the watch industry. But that's where I'm focused on, even though I manage the publication altogether. It's a little bit of a pity since I've only been to Baselworld twice, and by the third time it's cancelled. So that sort of ends my experience there. Still managing along as we go into this circuit breaker period where everything's shut down pretty much. We're not meeting our clients. Everything is communicated through digital channels like email and Zoom conference calls, and that's pretty much it.
So, Kien, what do you cover on Senators?
I do the allocation of the coverage. We have a team. We sort of jumped on telecommuting way before everyone else. So I keep my team in Singapore very light, but I have contributors from all over. Most of them are based regionally. My travel writer and two of my contributors for watches also work out of Thailand. I have a fashion writer who has moved with her family to London, and she's been contributing for the past 6-7 years that way. And that's how the team is managed. So we're sort of ahead of the telecommuting schedule there, and that's really how I've managed how the publication is run. For watches, because so many of our partners are here, so it sort of fell on my shoulders to maintain those relationships here. Also win some of the accounts that are based here locally, because ultimately most of the advertising mandates that we get are through the Singapore offices, or at least through the Singapore office that runs the region. So in short, that's
right. Then we have a handsome young Korean, Jamie Tan, managing editor of Augustman. You want to tell me a bit about yourself and
Sure. So my name is Jamie. I manage and I edit Augustman Singapore. That's a men's lifestyle title, and we basically focus on a couple of different key areas, watches being one of them. And I cover the watch beat along with Evigan, my co-worker. This would have been my 6th Basel and my 6th SIHH, or as they call it, Watches and Wonders now, if it hadn't been cancelled. So I'm not exactly new to the industry, but I'm not as experienced as some of our other moderators here today, like Alvin, for example. I believe it should be his 12th or 13th by now.
17th.
17th, my bad. You're a lot older than I remember.
Joke that I'll be there for the last Basel, but I think it has really happened that I was there.
Alas, yes. So my team is actually telecommuting now as well. We started about 2 weeks before the circuit breaker. So yeah, it's been quite challenging, but I'm sure we can all talk about that in just a bit.
Okay, so obviously now times are tough. We are in a business where we are not essential. There are a lot of essential people doing work that like healthcare, transport, and so on and so forth. We are in a business that seems almost superfluous now. So how do you guys cope with writing about beautiful stuff, writing about luxury watches, and trying to make it, relevant and not tone deaf against like what's happening. Kien?
Well, we've certainly noticed, just monitoring readership trends, we've certainly noticed a dip. Initially, it wasn't that much, but a dip globally in stuff that covers something more of the superfluous, as you said, or live, or more luxury lifestyle. One thing we wanted to do as a magazine, and obviously a decision undertaken myself since I own the place, was to support more awareness of Singapore businesses and brands, and that's something that we sort of put at the top of our website now. It's a small subsection that we've culled out from all of our content, in which we revisit some of the brands and businesses that initially wouldn't have fallen under our radar as a purely lifestyle, luxury-driven business. This goes down to your local eatery, which we don't really cover the F&B beat all the way down to that level. But to that end, now we do, because we wanted to make sure that we were using whatever reach we still had to raise awareness for our fellow Singaporean businesses. And it's been challenging because obviously everyone's not really in the mood I mean, if we were a travel magazine, it would suck, because you'd be, hotels, you wouldn't know if the hotels would reopen, you wouldn't know if air travel would take place the same way it would before. I just read a piece today that talked about how the A380 was going to be redundant in the future. This was from the Emirates CEO, just because there won't be that large scale of travel all at one time at the same time. So that's just some of the things that we have to be aware of as we head into the new reality, I guess.
So. Jamie, what about yourself? How is Augustman delivering content in a different way? Have you had to evolve in ways that you never thought you'd be doing?
Well, my experience with readership was slightly different from Kien's, because we actually saw a slight increase in our numbers when it came to augustman.com, which is our online website. I cannot give a definite answer as to why this is happening, but we are putting up more content online now, because we have been scaling back some of our print operations to reach more people, even though for print magazine, we're making it available for free online for the coming 3 months. So we're entering our second month of that. With regard to the additional online content, I think that may partly explain why we have a slight increase in readership. But I think what is also happening is that with everyone staying at home, people may just be browsing the internet more, and maybe I'm just on the lucky end of things. With regard to Augustman as a lifestyle title, I don't think the transition was as drastic for us, because we have been constantly covering various aspects of the lifestyle beat. So even for now, when restaurants are not able to take in diners, for example, we are still able to cover the ones who are on our radar, who have exciting new menus that you can take away or you can deliver to your homes. And when it comes to travel, yeah, I can imagine how badly it must suck, but we also have the discretion on our end to scale things back a little and to focus more on other beats that currently are of interest to our readers. So for example, when it comes to fitness, we have been talking to fitness trainers who are actually doing their private trainings with existing clients via Zoom, for example. So that's something that just came out in a story we just ran. I think that is something that is of interest to existing readers. And just to touch a little bit about the final part regarding luxury, I don't think it is necessarily something that we should avoid talking about just because times are not good. In fact, when it comes to such objects, it could be a form of escapism, for example, and that's something that we will be happy to continue covering.
Right. Because no one wants to read about COVID news all the time, right?
Yes, for sure. And I think when it comes to difficult times, it's when you see how brands react and when you get a better gauge of which brands you may identify a little more strongly with. Because if you're a brand that just decides to cut back on everything, what does that say about your products, for example? Or if you're a brand that just decides to go ahead with everything? Are you sending a different message instead? So the questions are there. I think it's up to the individual to draw their own conclusions.
So we have, Crown is a watch magazine, of course, and we work in the watch industry, and we all know that watch brands are, I think, more guarded than many other companies. So for this, although we're not we don't cover current events, but we have to make sure that we are not in a bubble also. So for one of the stories we wanted to do is a very simple story about reaching out to watch brands and asking them for response, how they're coping with this pandemic, what are measures, what kind of measures they have in place. So the response we got back was actually very varied. Some brands chose to not comment at all. Some of the things is the reasons they gave was that it wasn't brand elevating, they said. But what could be, to me, I was thinking what could be brand elevating at this point in time, whereas there are other brands who actually were quite quick to come in to give their response. So you can see that there's actually kind of a difference in how brands actually want to engage and to show a more human side to their companies. So I don't know whether if you guys have any experience with dealing with issues or doing stories like that, specific to watch brands.
Kien, shall I go first?
Sure.
I think what has been very frustrating is that some of these brands are actually heavily involved in CSR, but they are not communicating about it. So for me personally, I was involved in a meeting with a brand, I believe 2 days ago. It shall not be named, of course. And basically the local, no lah, sensitive. So basically the local MD was sharing about some of the initiatives that they have been doing, but everything with regard to this brand has been anonymous when it comes to donations, when it comes to support. And I think as a journalist, what is of interest to me is to perhaps share a little about this this good work and to help to amplify their efforts by perhaps showing where this brand is actually channeling its resources to, so that, let's say, if you identify with the brand or if you identify with the initiative, you can also donate yourself. But because everything is so heavily guarded that there is zero communication about it, it has been very frustrating in the sense that I cannot help to amplify their efforts. But of course, you have the brands that are quite happy to share what they've been doing. For those, I think I'm happy to join in as well.
So the brand that is quite under the radar when it comes to this is because they do not want it to be publicized.
Yeah, because they're stubborn, I guess. So they know they're doing good work. They are happy to continue doing it. They have been doing more than usual, but they just don't want to talk about it.
So is this brand run by a trust? Ask Sean most of that.
I have no comments.
Kien?
We like I said, we've been managing the kind of content we've been putting out. Clearly, as opposed to what Jamie has done, we haven't gone all out on luxury, even though we clearly position ourselves as a premier luxury magazine. But having said that, we've been planning some stories also, stories with different brands on our own initiative, stories with brands that normally wouldn't be on the top of their radar now, just because clearly different brands have different schedules with how they plan to communicate about their product. So maybe if this particular month they were launching a new product, and I wanted to revisit something that we hadn't written before, that this was something that probably might not get so much support, but with a couple of different brands that we thought was interesting to flesh out some of the details of certain things they were doing on, if this was a normal year. We've been able to get some of the information. So there's certainly some elbow room to work on getting some of that information now more than ever before, just because everything is sort of quiet. I don't know for the others, but clearly there are not many ad campaigns that are aggressively being run now. maybe some content campaigns from different brands. Probably not in the watch industry, but I've seen like Samsung become really aggressive with their new campaigns, and also Huawei at the same time. But and maybe some of the car companies trying to move their inventory, so all the dealers are running ads on social media now. But not so much for the watch business. So everyone's sort of hunkering down. That's my take on it so far.
So as content creators, as writers, right? I mean, did you have to watch the way you write or present your stories? Do you have to change anything at all?
Not for me. I mean, we always write the same tone. Some people might like our tone or not, but it's always been more of an introductory tone. We lay it out there in terms of what we are trying to introduce to our readership. We've never gone the extreme of being, superfluous or use over exaggerated emotions anyway. So certainly not in the narration style of the lifestyles of the rich and famous. So we've never adopted that kind of attitude anyway. So we don't see any pushback in that sense. I don't know from Jamie.
Yeah, I agree with Kien completely on this part because I mean, if you are going to cover a product, a good product is a good product, and it's good enough to be featured in your title, then it deserves its due justice, basically. So we cover it as per normal. We give the facts, we give our opinions if it is relevant. And I think that's about it. So with regard to features, however, I think we have been skewing a little bit more for Augustman's both print and online content to perhaps be of more use to our readers who are stuck indoors. So for example, simple recipes that you can DIY at home without too much time, or workouts that are more suitable for you if you have no gear at home and your local fitness corner is busted up or cordoned off, for example. So in terms of that, yes, but I think for luxury, no, there is no reason for us to tone it down or to approach it from a different perspective.
I think we have a bit of a different discussion right now.
I think previously we did mention, because Crown Watch blog, we do a lot of watch and reviews because that's what our audience seemed to like. But it's been hard for us to continue going down this path, and continue to write. 'Cause our titles are usually brand name, model, and then Singapore price and review. So it's a bit hard for us to now, keep talking about price, knowing that people are going through difficult times. So I think for us, the way we've sort of changed things up a bit is we, like what most of you are doing also, we do it more like a news piece. So this is a new watch rather than, hey, this is the watch that you should go out and buy right now. Because a lot of people don't have that spare cash to do that. So
yeah,
I mean, we've had to sort of tweak our approach a little bit. Yeah.
On a personal level, right? It's almost like you're seeing expensive stuff, branded stuff, and then you want to look at it, you want to internalize it, and then you want to review it in a way that does justice to the product as well as to the readers. But at the same time, I mean, this is just personally, we're all going through like tough times. So to like switch on to a mode where you can actually craft it there's kind of a weird conundrum here, because there's a personal experience of what is happening right now versus the so-called fantasy world that we're presenting to our readers at the same time. So personally, I have struggled with that a bit for especially since during the start of the pandemic.
So with the change in editorial directions, right? What has your readers' response been like?
It's just
change per se. It's just, I think, the tone
slightly toned down, I guess.
Just got to be more sensitive. Like for example, I won't say like, oh yeah, this watch is great for a red carpet party or some thing like that. I won't say these kind of things anymore. In normal times, maybe you could use phrases like that, but we don't do it for this period, I guess.
But also, a lot of watch brands are a bit more restrained now, and also we have certain brands that are not even launching any new products this year.
Mhm.
So that has been a bit of a challenge for us in the media as well. I don't know about the both of you. Do you feel that we have enough watch content to cover in these times?
I mean, my personal view, I mean, is I liked what Crown was doing when you shared some of your archival pieces, and sometimes we forget that some of the best pieces that are done were behind us, and so this is a good time to refresh the readership. You share some of the links to some of the older articles that were published, and they still remain classic pieces because the classic timepieces are still around. So that's a good strategy. I don't know if there's a need to in this kind of work environment to keep chasing the same kind of quotas that initially your manager did put on you. So I've seen on my end, I've put less emphasis on meeting certain job work output during this time as I would before, and certainly we are not taking on any in-house productions now, like outdoor shoots and all that kind of stuff. So a lot of that stuff has been toned down quite a bit. So I think your strategy works. It's a strategy that I haven't started yet. It's probably something that's worth looking into if we find ourselves wanting to go down that direction.
Recently, we've also been seeing brands present their products to the media in various ways, and I think it's been quite interesting. We've got a mixed bag of things. What do you all think about the new ways that the brands are presenting their product?
Just to give a bit of context, sorry to jump in. We've had Brightlink that did a global summit, right? A summit webcast.
Yeah, that's about 2 weeks ago, I believe.
Press conferences, and then Watches and Wonders, the Geneva-based watch fair. Instead of a physical exhibition, I think there were 30 brands, and they were all on the website. From the media, we could access their materials, their photos, and everything. And each brand, I think, had their CEO present the products a bit, right? And then we also, on a more local level, we had Patek Philippe, who did webinar. How do you pronounce webinar?
Webinar, yes.
Yeah. So we all got in. We got a lunch, and we attended a talk. And also, Vacheron Constantin, they also did a presentation, right? Yesterday, where they had the creative director present the artistic and heritage director, I think, present the watches to us. So all this has happened. I just want to know, what are your thoughts on these online presentations? Jamie?
I think maybe we should give our listeners a little bit of context here, or a little bit of background as to what usually happens at watch fairs.
Okay.
So in the past, if it were, for example, SIHH in January, we'll all fly into Geneva, and we will have a couple of events every day, basically different ones all packed back to back, right? So you will usually have your product presentation. You will also have your individual appointments where you will speak to HQ personnel, be it interviews or a closer look at certain products. And I think for some of us, we also arrange for our own shoots at SIHH or Baselworld, whichever it is, where we have some very basic styling, and we basically shoot images that are of good enough quality to be printed or put online that is different from what the media kits or the press kits provide. So when it comes down to this year, when you have your online presentations and then you have your interviews separate, I think the latter has been very helpful on my side, because I am not that affected if it's a Zoom interview, as long as I have access to the product director, to the CEO, or whoever else I want to speak to get a better story. But I do find that there is limited efficacy when it comes to online presentations of the products, because a lot of times what I find the most useful are actually the last 10 minutes when we have our Q&A session. The bulk of it, the first 50 minutes when you have your presentation of the products and your guy talking there, it doesn't really make that big of a difference, because they basically are rehashing what the press kits are saying. So that has been a little bit more limited in its usefulness for me. So I would prefer personally to see perhaps shorter interviews, but to have more. To have shorter presentations, but to have more interview opportunities.
My perspective is for Watches and Wonders in particular. Maybe this is a holding year where they would have wanted to do a live event and they didn't, and so they all went digital. But other than everyone uploading their content into one singular website called Watches and Wonders, I really didn't see the point, unless you were one of those publications that wanted to be first out the door, and either case you either had all the information pre-embargo and it didn't really matter when Watches and Wonder was actually going live, or two, that was the kind of readership you were going after, people who just wanted to devour all the information as early as possible so that they could screenshot that and share with friends and have their own private conversations. Senators is not that kind of publication in the first place, so we were not always trying to rush to be first out of the door. And if that was the case, we were getting emails from the different brand managers on the products anyways, and so I don't know how effective Watches and Wonders was this year, given that it was just, to me, as a digital publisher, it was just a very snazzy website that had all the different brands, and you could go into different rooms. And then if you wanted to download, you still had to use a different password to try and get the information. So,
but I think even then the downloads were low resolution and not quite useful, right, Kien?
Yeah, exactly. So in the end, you still try and get in touch with a brand manager to get the assets if there was a story you wanted to run. So maybe this was the first year that they were doing this, but if there was any year to go cold turkey and try something you haven't done, this was the year to do it. I don't know if Watches and Wonders, I mean, the same criticism has been made of Baselworld, that it was not digital enough, and Watches and Wonders came up, and then I don't know if they did anything better than what Baselworld would have done. That's it. On the other hand, I thought what Breitling did was quite special. You know, we work with them, so that's a disclaimer. I thought what they did was quite special because everyone else had preloaded information in. That CEO was doing really a recorded video, but what George Kern did was a live webcast of the presentation. And like I said, if it was any year that it was going to go cold turkey and try it out, this was the year to do it, and I thought it was quite interesting. They had a different time slot clearly from when Watches and Wonders was lifting their embargo, so they had a whole window all to themselves. And I think on the second note, what they did, I think some of the brands that participated in Watches and Wonders did that, but what Breitling did was obviously show an updated collection, which is ambitious, and I think. I mean, Cartier also launched a new collection, a small sub collection, but not everyone else dared to do that, and so that was quite commendable. And it was one of their key collections as well. It was the Chronomat, one of their pillars of the brands. And I wouldn't say they were tone deaf because they prepped themselves at the right time. They dominated the conversation for people who liked watches, who were passionate about Breitling watches, who were passionate about chronographs, and so that was a good time to come out. And in a sense, it was also good because as a recorded webcast, what that meant was it catered to the new age media. The new age media meaning people like us who might not necessarily want to sit through something live and we could watch it later. Also the new age consumer, where they also made it available on YouTube so people could go to their YouTube channel and look at it, because nowadays, the consumer also wants to be as knowledgeable as the media. If not, they think more. So to that end, I thought that was quite commendable.
So actually, what we've been talking about, right? Like these experiences with Basel, with Watches and Wonders. This is a very sort of an insular experience. We go as journalists, as press, to bring all this information back, but to the reader, right, they don't really give a shit about what happens at the back end, right? So it's.
But I think they should, Alvin.
Sorry, let me just finish. How we present the information to them. So ultimately, what they see is like what we put out in the magazines, what we put out on social media and on our online platforms. So, my point is like when we're sharing all these things, right? My question is like, do the readers even care or not? Do the readers care that there's no Basel? Do the readers care that the Watches and Wonders has just gone online? And
because the information will get out to them anyway, right?
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
And then Sean has a question. So he says, with the increase of brands cutting straight to social media and releasing info directly to consumers, right? What is our part in all of this?
I think to have a different analogy to this, Alvin, would you play a guitar at a gig and not tune it up, knowing that your audience doesn't really give a shit? I don't think so, right? Because you still want your guitar to be in tune. As a musician, that is the basics, and you want to cover the basics. So even if, here it comes. So even if your audience is tone deaf, you still do it because that is what is expected. And I think for us as journalists, we should hold ourselves to a higher standard in the sense that we head over there or we do it here. It doesn't really matter, but the important thing is for us to get all the information that we need. And part of this information isn't necessarily going to be in the press kit. And our job as journalists is to ask the right questions to grab all this. So with regard to Sean's question about what the media now brings to the table, I think for us as watch journalists or specialists even, it's important to still be the ones asking the questions to get the information and to perhaps raise questions that our readers may not have thought about. And ultimately, not just to introduce products, but to also lend a certain perspective to things. Like what my ex-boss, Celine, who's now with Esquire, used to say. So Rolex comes up with a Cerachrome bezel that isn't going to tarnish or isn't going to acquire a patina over time. Yes, that is on the surface an improvement, but as journalists, it is also our job to let our readers know that, hey, if you want something that can grow old and age with you, or to perhaps acquire a patina, look aged after a certain period of time, then perhaps this watch isn't for you. You should be looking at the aluminum bezels instead.
Well, if I would add, to answer Sean's question, if would media be important if brands can communicate with the end user themselves directly? And I would say this: sometimes some brands don't know how to sell their own products, and maybe media that's been in the business communicating with readers, watching the trends across the board, sometimes we know how to present their products a little bit better than them. And sometimes they have brand guidelines that prevent them from producing the kinds of compelling content that they themselves would produce. I mean, have you read an Hermès press release? I mean, if you've read it, it would sound as if a French poet wrote it in English. And if you sent it to the consumer, they wouldn't get it at all. Would Hermès sell it better? I don't know, And so it requires the local fashion magazines to interpret it for their local fashion readers. And I use a top brand that's outside the watch circle. I mean, Hermès has a watch section as well, but I talk about Hermès, the French brand, the French fashion brand. And so yes, there's some special sauce that we add in between getting the press release, in between looking at the same products, and that's where the value of media lies. If not, we would just publish the press releases direct. Anyways, and our role would diminish. That's not to say that from time to time our title hasn't done it. It sometimes it's like what people say in Singapore: if you have nothing good to say, don't add more stuff to say to it, and sometimes that happens. So
I have one question, a general one, about writing about watches. Sometimes we are, as the media, we are being criticized for only writing the good stuff. Right, we are not critical enough because it is a advertiser-driven economy, right? So, I mean, do we stand guilty of what we are being accused of?
To some extent, definitely, because I do give priority to advertisers. But I think for Augustman and most other titles, you always have that bit of leeway to feature other brands inside your longer feature stories that are more thematic, for example. And I think for journalists in general, yes, we only talk about the good stuff because there just isn't enough time. So if I am avoiding a brand, for example, maybe that should say something. But of course, I mean, we, even as journalists, when we're on the other side, when we're readers, we tend to see where the ball is and not where the ball isn't. So perhaps it's also up to the readers to read between the lines. And if I have not covered a product, maybe that should say something about the product itself.
That they're not advertising.
No. Even if it's an advertiser.
Kien?
I think we've been lucky. Senators gets about 30% or so of our total advertising from watches. So we are not chasing every watch story in the first place. And we're not so much like Crown, where we're trade media, where it sort of behooves you sometimes to cover certain stories about certain brands. For us, if we don't cover them, it might be because we don't particularly like the particular product, or in a sense we didn't think it offered anything new. So we were lucky in the sense that we can be a little bit more selective about what we cover. We don't do the kind of watch reviews that some of the larger titles in the States do, and certainly some of the more critical anonymous Instagram accounts do on their in terms of how they review. So that hasn't affected us so much per se. We just feature what we like.
I think Terence, you can count on this guy Terence Lim to speak the truth. He's a fellow colleague. He said he's guilty as charged. If he wrote the truth all the time, he'd be out of a job a long time ago. But I guess the fact of the matter is that we all need to prioritize our coverage.
For sure.
In terms of who butters our bread, right? So there is that, and after that is done, we decide what is interesting to us and what is not interesting to us. I guess that's a formula that
or followers of our various publications can basically see through when we are writing something that we're not too enthusiastic about. I think it shows in our writing as well. But it is true that sometimes we do have to make this compromise, and like what Alvin said, pay attention to who butters the bread. But I don't think this is something that is specific to watch media. I think it's media in general, whatever industry you're in. We do try our very best to support our advertisers, and I think this is something that all of us deal with.
Have you guys written beautifully about a product that you hate?
Kien, you want to start?
I personally, like I said, I don't want to sound like I'm so removed on the situation, but we are very lucky that we've only worked with brands that we like. I mean, we don't work with many brands. We worked with quite a few brands already, but for each particular product that we've been mandated to cover, it's so far been stuff that we personally like, or we found that there was something compelling to educate the audience about. And that's actually one of the core reasons why a couple of different brands have come to us. Because if someone hates a certain brand in some watch collector circles, whether they think they are not haute enough or not, then there's very little they can do with maximum effort to try and change those opinions. And for a destination like ours, where we have what I would consider a renewed readership, where it's a different kind of readership. It's not the hardcore watch collectors of the past, where they remembered, 40 years ago, oh, this brand made this really shit chronograph and it fell off, and then it's like, it's really boring. Whereas these people want to know, okay, this is what you worked on, this is what we focused on, this is what we like, readers who have a clean slate to learn more about this new product launch, and that's why they would come to us in this case. And so for us, that seems interesting when we are charged with communicating those points. And so I wouldn't say I didn't like certain products before, but I think the storyline that we were charged with pushing out certainly seemed very interesting to work on at the time.
I think on my end, in my experience so far, I mean, you rarely get a brand that is going to force you to cover a product. So we do have a freedom in that sense. But I think another, we should give credit where it is due, I think. So no one really sets out to make a bad watch, and you rarely get a watch that is just a complete stinking pile of shit. So there is always something to talk about or a good point about the watch that someone may like about it. So even if it isn't, for example, mechanically too interesting, there are other ways that we can cover it, like as part of a spread, for example, if it's very design driven. So I think it comes down to, on one level, picking what you like, and on another level, if you really have no choice and you must cover something, then it is up to you to pick out the good points to perhaps highlight them, so that someone who may be interested in such traits may take notice. And it isn't necessarily always going to be a 2-minute watch video or a 300-word story. So there are many different ways to cover a product, and I think that's our job, right? So to be creative about it and to highlight value where it exists is part of the job and part of the challenge.
I think with something like watches, it's definitely a product that is very opinion based. For example, I could like a particular watch, but you might think it's really ugly. And to borrow the words of Tim Mossel from Watchbox, he once said, whether I like, if I think a watch is ugly, that's not the problem of the watch. That is my opinion of it. So it doesn't
Yes,
mean
definitely.
watch. It's just that I personally don't like it. So as watch journalists, yes, I agree with you that I think it's just about finding, what is good about the watch, finding something that we can say that's positive about the watch, and just because you personally don't like it doesn't mean it's a bad product.
Yeah, for sure.
And just to circle back on what you said earlier, Jamie, we create content, right? We are professionals, right? So we know the tools in our toolbox to execute a particular piece of content, whether it's a short article, a visual, or video, or a review, or whatever. These are what we have at our disposal to present something in a way that's palatable to the audience, right? That just does justice to the product at the same time. So, yeah, I mean, this is what our job is, and this is what we are so-called paid to do, lah. So, I mean, on that note, shall we move on to talk about some of our favorite watches that we've seen so far?
Oh, yes.
Do it.
So, who wants to start first?
Ladies first, lah.
Well, for me, if you're going to, I already talked about the Breitling Chronomat. So if you want to just throw up the picture,
Throw a picture. So, Kien, you go first, lah.
Yes.
So, Kien likes this one. This is a Breitling Chronomat. You wanna?
Well, there are 2 or 3 key features about it. So this is a refresher of a classic range that they have, and what you have now are these rider tabs that 15 and 45 are interchangeable. You can have them professionally at a store swapped out so that you can either count up or count down. So that's quite interesting. Obviously, the rider tabs in and of themselves on the bezel is an iconic look for the Chronomat. That's become very popular in different parts of the world. In Japan, for example, it's the top-selling Breitling range. And the NB01 in-house chronograph movement, as you can see from the different subdials, that's something that if you've been updated with Breitling's new product launches, you will realize that the different colored subdial actually means that it's an in-house chronograph. And I think the third thing that draws to your eye is the Rollo bracelet, the integrated link bracelet that looks like a row of bullets. That I haven't had the chance to see in person, but a good topic that we mentioned just now. Some media has had a chance to take a look at it in person, and that's where the review makes a lot of difference, because for some of those who've seen this watch in person, they said the fit is very comfortable. From a picture, we can't tell whether it's comfortable or not, and that's I think the difference between seeing it in person or getting it from the press release.
Mel, you want to go next?
Sure. My pick would be the VC traditional tourbillon for women. Do you have the picture?
Where? Oops, hang on.
I forgot you picked a VC.
It's okay. We can both like VC. So the one that I really like is the full diamond pave one. It's VC's first tourbillon for women, and it's also running on the caliber 2160, which is the brand's first in-house automatic tourbillon. And I think it's a really nice touch that they put it in a women's watch for the first time, and it's nice to see women's watches getting a bit more technical.
Yeah, sorry, I just put out the picture. I was looking for it.
Okay, there it is. Yeah. So you see, it's a pretty simple dial, not the one with the diamonds, of course, but it's a clean look, and the focus really is on the tourbillon at 6 o'clock, and it's just, to me, a really beautiful timepiece, and about time that women got a complicated timepiece like this. Yeah.
Jamie?
Oh, for me, yes. It's quite a mouthful, so I'm going to try to do it once without a mistake. The Vacheron Constantin La Musique du Temps, Les Cabinetiers, The Singing Birds. So
Wonderful.
this one is basically a private collection that they have only started sharing a little bit more from this year onwards. We have here a series of 4 one-off watches, and they all follow the same theme. You have wandering hours complication on the right-hand side, and on the left you have a different bird for each of these 4 unique timepieces. And basically what I like about this is how it balances between your métier d'art very well with the not too complex complication, and how the two serve to, shall we say, complement each other. Because when you have your wandering hours like this, the sector basically takes its own space, right? Which gives you a very big blank canvas to showcase your métier on the left-hand side, which is done, in this case, in Champlivé enameling. And well, on the right-hand side where the display is, it's also been treated with guilloche, hand guilloche, in fact. So the overall product is just something that is very familiar if you are familiar with VC's products, in the sense that you have a very stunning display of art, but at the same time, you have the underlying complication serving it. So it just feels like a very complete package to me. And this was one of the first things that came to mind when you guys asked me about picking my favorite watch this year.
Okay.
Alvin?
So, share mine.
Oh, I know Alvin's.
You know,
Fanboy of this brand.
yeah, I'm a fanboy of this brand. Cannot afford the watches, but love them so much. I like the Lange one. I like the philosophy of Lange as a brand. I'm into classic looking watches, but this one is really something quite out of the ordinary. Late last year, Lange launched a new collection called the Odysseus, which is supposed to be a luxury sports collection. And this is a category of watches that is very, very hard to do, because everybody is going to compare you to an Audemars Piguet Royal Oak or a Patek Philippe Nautilus. So they had a hard time trying to get the product out. So when the first iteration of the Odysseus came out late last year, it was a first series produced stainless steel collection for Lange. It had a blue dial with a blue bracelet. When it came out, it was quite a divisive watch. People liked it, thought it was nice. People who didn't like it, they were frothing at the mouth, like complaining, like, "Wow, Lange cannot do this kind of watch." So I was kind of on the fence for a long while, but I kind of liked the way it felt on the wrist. I liked how it was a Lange watch thoroughbred, in that you can see the outsized date, and they have added a day of the week, which is very pure Lange aesthetic. And I like that they managed to step out of their comfort zone to do something like that. So at Watches on Wonders this year, they came up with a white gold version, which you see here, which they pair with a rubber strap or a leather strap. So I felt that with this version, that again I cannot afford, even worse because it's white gold, not stainless steel, right? it really came into its own as a casual luxury sports watch because the look is somehow more complete and somehow more set within the luxury sports spirit. So this is definitely one of my favorites that I've seen so far.
Was it this extended strap option that actually sealed the deal for you?
And the different colored dial, I was surprised that they could do this execution. So Wendy asked, are all our favorites advertisers?
No. Elvin, show them my. I had two. Show them the other one. Show them the other brand that I liked. They're not my advertisers for a couple of years now. I'm happy to say it. I don't mind saying it.
Relax. Show
Show them. He's not prepared.
Where is it? Hang on. You want to talk about it first?
Yeah, sure. I mean, show it.
Okay, it's this one.
The asymmetric, right? If I remember.
Yes. See, the Cartier is not an advertiser of mine, but I prepared this in my notes. I thought this was quite interesting, given the overall Cartier strategy. So they, along with Breitling, were one of the few that came out with a totally new collection during this special pandemic crisis. But they were bold, but this kept to their strategy, which I thought was interesting because this taps on their pre-existing wealthy consumer base. That would go after the crashes, the rest of the Cartier Privé collection, the tonneau, the crashes, and now the tank asymmetric. So this would bring them in sales or revenues from a core strength of consumers that could afford it. You know, I've had conversations with a couple of people who pinged me and asked me if I found out about this right when it was launched, and they were interested to buy already. And that just is a testament to how they got this strategy right. You know. Whereas some other brands launched refinements of their pre-existing collection, which were good as well, but a little less aggressive and a little less ambitious. So that's not my advertiser.
Well, Lang is an advertiser. I'll be honest about it, but my advertisers make good watches, so.
VC is an advertiser for Augustman, but curiously enough, I actually just had a look at my top advertisers for the past year, and no, they're not in my top 3 or top 5. So this was definitely not. This wasn't influenced by money in any way, I assure you.
Okay, shall we just maybe round off this session looking at like maybe have a wish list of sorts? What kind of watches do we hope to see more? What brands are we looking forward to seeing?
Kien?
Well, for me, I hope we come out of this crisis, all of us, media, relatively unscathed. Because while everything is going on, watch brands still feel like they can launch watch collections. But for many of us, the advertising revenues have been put on hold. And yet, as media, we are expected to continue operating work from home as per normal. That's not sustainable. You saw Blue Ink in Malaysia already shut down, and that's 5 to I don't know how many titles that is. So clearly, they were running on the edge already, and this sort of tipped them over. I don't know how many of our peers in this business can survive for the next 5-6 months with no advertising, and yet a brand would expect you to continue writing stories and put in those same resources, whether you're telecommuting or not. So that, to me, I hope all of my peers, as many of my peers, can survive this relatively unscathed. For the brands, I don't think many of the small independent ones are going to survive. They will have margin calls. They would have stopped production. I don't know whether they produce a $150,000 watch or a $500,000 watch, whether they have the resources to continue paying someone, even though they are not allowed to go to work now, although I hear Switzerland is slowly opening up. So it depends on how long you've planned that horizon to be for watch brands. So to me, I don't know what to expect from watches in the future, but you certainly need to make a product, whether we're in a recession or not, that's compelling, that someone likes. You might not be the girl that everyone asks to dance with at a party, but someone's got to ask you to the party. And if you're stubbornly producing products that have not communicated or resonated with anybody, then this spells doom, I think.
Jamie?
I think my wish list has more to do with how we get to view and see these products. Because I think even before COVID-19 came about, we have had a lot of grumblings and rumblings about changes in the industry, how brands are thinking of releasing products slowly or in quarters, every half a year, etc., and how they plan to do regional events instead of international ones, how some are pulling out of fairs, etc. And I think if nothing else, this crisis has shown us that we are stronger together and that we should band together to head back to the fairs. I think we have had many complaints about Basel, and I think most of them were valid. So if not Basel, something else. By all means, we should think of something else. But there is really nothing quite like seeing a watch in person and being able to talk to someone in person about the watch itself. And I guess what I'm hoping the brands themselves recognize is that you can't possibly do business like this. And as much as you'd like to think that you have the resources to do it on your own, to strike it out and ignore the fairs, we really should be doing it all together because it's the most efficient use of time and because it's the most efficient use of resources.
I want to add something. I think sometimes going to fairs as media or trade media is important because sometimes what bowls me over is not the product, but it's the CEO selling the product. Jean-Claude Bivet, who's, I guess, almost retired out of the business, is the only guy I've ever seen talk about wearing a watch that will bring you luck. To evoke that kind of emotion, I've never seen somebody do it. So whatever he introduces to us sometimes can win us over in a way that in which the product itself on its own cannot. So Jean-Claude Bivet is not an advertiser of mine, but like I said, introducing something, sometimes it's just so magnetic. So sometimes you need the intermediary, in our case, media, to be there, because if we can capture that experience in words or on a video, then that makes a big difference. Because the end consumer is not going to get a presentation from the CEO talking about the watch.
For sure. And I just to add on a little bit, I think nothing quite excites us watch people as seeing 1,000 other people waiting to get into the hall to view the watches for the day. And that excitement isn't just, contagious, but it's also something that gives you energy for the rest of the year. And
I mean, if we're all went to, but I wasn't very excited about queuing up.
I mean, look at my face now, man. I'm looking bored as hell talking to Alvin and Melissa. I wish I could be there now looking at the watches instead, but oh well. No, I'm just kidding.
No,
but I would like to look at the watches.
It's actually something that I mentioned to Alvin before, that, whenever I go to a watch fair, it energizes me and it reminds me why I'm doing what I do. Because for most of the year, when I'm churning out stories, and sometimes it's really churning, you just get caught up in writing and writing and writing, and it's not very pleasant sometimes. But when you go to the watch fair, you actually...
It's not pleasant.
Sorry?
It's not pleasant.
No, it's not. It's not pleasant having to churn out stories all the time. But when you go to the watch fair and you meet the people who make the watches, you meet the people whose lives, are so entwined with the brands, the watches, you get inspired by them. You feed off their energy and you see the watches in the flesh, and that really, really makes a difference. And I was actually just telling one of the brand representatives that if anything, this pandemic has shown me that watch fairs are so needed, so essential, because what we are getting right now is a barrage of press releases. We just get press release after press release from all the brands, and we don't even get to see the watch. So what I'm looking at is email after email of text and images, but I have no idea what they're really talking about. Whereas in the past, we would go to the fair in the day. At night, we go back to our rooms, we're writing. Then we look at the press releases. Then it makes sense. We can connect the watches to the press releases. And
your initial touch point is different in that sense, right?
Yes. So it helps us tell the story much better, having seen the watches. So I really think it's quite sad. Obviously for this year, for obvious reasons, we cannot have the watch fair. But seeing Basel World collapse like that, it is very sad to me. And I think that a fair that has over 100 years of history shouldn't just topple like that. And it's a disservice actually to the entire watch industry to have Baselworld collapse.
Yeah,
I don't
so-
know. I mean, let's just quickly add. I don't know if large-scale events are going to continue to take place. I mean, so I don't know if Watches and Wonders is even possible. Cirque du Soleil is on the brink of collapse just because large-scale attendances are just not. People just don't think large-scale gatherings of large scale are going to happen in future. So I think that needs to be some
whether
rethinking.
large scale or smaller presentations. I think the important thing here we are all kind of wanting is to experience the products for ourselves, because watches are not, they're inanimate objects, but they are made by people, and any brand who wants to reach out to their customers, and this real sweet spot for a watch is to have an emotional connection to whoever who is reviewing it, whoever is buying it or trying it on. So that kind of experience needs to be tactile, because watches are something that you wear. So as the sort of like the first line of people who receive that information, whether we go for a large watch fair or smaller presentation, it's important for us to actually talk to the people who make the watches and see the watches for themselves, wear it for ourselves, and see what we actually like or dislike about the watch that is not actually articulated in press release. So I guess that's why we are kind of like, missing,
Indispensable.
missing the fest so much.
Yeah. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. We're really glad that Kien and Jamie could join us in this conversation. And like Kien mentioned, we really want to work together with our fellow media friends, because this is a really difficult time for all of us, brands, media, everyone. And it's good if we can all just, come together, help one another out. And let's hope that we can ride out this pandemic together. So thank you again
Thanks for having
joining
us.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Okay, see you guys back on WhatsApp.
See you.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us, our viewers, and for all your bolio comments. See you guys. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Goodbye.